So I'm dreaming of this place. It's Leopold's Book Bar Cafe. It's the dreamiest bookstore, cafe, and cocktail bar combo you'll ever find. And it's right here at 1301 Regent Street. They've got the latest books from around the world, wines to sip or take home, and live jazz, plus open hours until midnight most nights of the week. You can grab a drink or dessert and just kick back at Leopold's. Today on CityCast Madison. Thanksgiving Tea Day, also known as Turkey Day, is upon us. Gobble gobble. Madison's full of wild turkeys now. But did you know that the wild turkey was once almost wiped off the map entirely in this region? So next time you see one waddle across campus or waddle in the road, don't take its existence for granted. We asked UW-Madison wildlife ecologist David Drake why turkeys are thriving in Madison. It's Tuesday, November 21st. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. David, hello.
Well, hello, Bianca. Nice to see you this morning.
So nice to see you. Excited about this convo because we're talking about some wild birds today. So why does Madison have so many turkeys?
Well, the easy answer to that is Madison has wonderful turkey habitat. And when we think about habitat, it really comes down to four basic areas. So it's food, water, shelter, and then space. What we have here in Madison, turkeys tend to like areas that have pockets or components of forested area with adjacent open areas. And if you think about Madison, we have a lot of forested areas distributed through neighborhoods, city parks, places like that. And then we have a lot of open areas adjacent to that. So even in neighborhoods, if you've got a forested area and an outlot, for example, we have a lot of mowed turf.
I've seen so many of them at the Arboretum.
Yep, that's a perfect example. Yeah, so along the Necker Garden is ideal turkey habitat, and that's one of the reasons that there's so many there. So they like the trees for a number of reasons. They will roost or sleep in the trees and on the branches at night. So they're off the ground, so they're safe from predation while they're sleeping. And then they come down to the ground during the day to forage, to move around, things like that. And turkeys, obviously, as a bird, they can fly, but they can't fly long distances.
You read my mind. I was a little embarrassed to ask. I was like, have I seen a turkey flying? I mostly see them walking.
No, they put little turkey ladders up against the tree and then just hike that ladder up.
See, that's what I thought. Yeah.
No, they can fly, and they're pretty strong flyers, but they're such a big bird that they can't fly for long distances. So they prefer to walk or run on the ground, but then they'll fly up into the trees at night to roost. They'll come down to the ground during the day to move around, look for food, things like that. So we have a lot of good habitat here for turkeys. There's not a lot of mortality. People aren't trying to hunt them because you can't discharge a firearm in the city of Madison or most municipalities. So the mortality rate.
And everyone might
low.
not know that. What you just said to emphasize that you can't discharge a firearm in the city limits. So
people do, but you shouldn't. Yeah, exactly. It's not safe for us or the birds. So that's part of it. And then it's pretty good living. There's a lot of food available here. Think about people's bird feeders and all of the oak trees we have. They eat a lot of acorns, a lot of grubs, things of that nature. So it's habitat related. And then the other part of this story is we have certain species that are adaptable to a changing landscape. So to an urbanizing landscape. And turkeys tend to be, surprisingly, one of those species that are able to adapt to a quickly changing landscape with a lot of human concentration, a lot of human impact and footprint. And the interesting thing about that is I'm 58 years old. When I was in school learning about turkey management, we did not discuss turkeys as an urban adapted species. We talked about, in my classes, turkeys out in rural areas, country areas, things like that. And certainly the generations before me, that's what they were taught. So we are now teaching our students about urban turkey management, and that is a relatively new concept simply because these animals have adapted to urban environments.
Do we have any sense of how many live in our city?
No, but there's quite a few of them.
Yeah.
And it's gotten to the point, depending on where you are in the city, that people's tolerance for turkeys is starting to wane or to be reduced a tad bit. There's issues in the Arboretum, for example, with too many turkeys. We've had
I've
issues.
never seen anything like it. And they really do. They look wild. They look like dinosaurs. And they're just they run the Arboretum, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
sorry if you actually do run the Arboretum. No,
I don't. They're not the only overabundant species there. We have overabundant deer populations in the Arboretum and other parts of Madison as well. So, we see a lot of turkeys, but they're not the only species that is abundant in Madison and throughout other urban areas in the United States.
You talked about how they have adapted to be an urban space. Is that like a Madison thing because we do have so much forested areas, or is that pretty universal?
In urban areas across the United States, we are seeing an increase in wildlife species in these urban areas. And typically those species that are in urban areas are more dense or more populous than their cousin or their cohort that would be in non-urban areas. And it's just simply because there's so much food available on the urban landscape that these animals can take advantage of the food sources. Typically, there's reduced mortality and some other factors that have allowed these species to really kind of blossom or increase in these urban areas. And that is not unique to Madison. It's universal across the United States and across the world to some extent.
Okay, and so these turkeys aren't just eating acorns, they're also eating maybe food left out or around?
Well, they're eating, think about all the trees around the Madison area. We've got a lot of hardwoods, so producing mass like acorns, walnuts, and different types of seeds off of the tree. So there's a lot of natural food sources. They will also eat a lot of invertebrates, so a lot of insects and grubs in the soil, things like that. So just think about all the amount of mowed turf that we have in Madison. And again, I know we're talking about Madison, but it is not unique to Madison. And then, we've got turkeys that are coming to bird feeders. So there's a lot of natural food provision for these animals. But then we have this anthropogenic or human provided food source, both directly and indirectly. And people aren't putting out bird feeders for turkeys, but turkeys are certainly taking advantage of the seed that's dropped on the ground under that bird feeder. And, they're taking advantage of other food sources that might be around our residential areas and things like that.
You study turkeys along with many other species as an ecologist. And so I don't want to make light of turkeys, but they do, especially this time of year. It's kind of hard not to. They're kind of goofy. They're kind of goofy.
Yeah, 100% agree. They are.
But some people might not want them to be eating out of their bird feeder. And also I've seen turkeys attack and follow. And there's videos of that. Every now and then you'll hear about a postal worker or even someone on campus being attacked or at least followed. And I guess I'm curious, what kind of things make turkeys hostile to humans?
Well, yes, and they can be aggressive, and typically the aggressor is the male turkey or the tom. So that's the adult male. And Turkey Tom, most or Tom Turkey, however you want to say it. Sure. Most of those aggressive incidents occur in late winter going into the spring when the males are starting to surge with hormones in their body because they're going into breeding season. And they can be somewhat territorial, so that one tom will breed multiple females, but he's got to keep all the other toms away from those females. So they can get a little aggressive toward each other. And turkeys don't necessarily distinguish if somebody's in that area. They don't distinguish a turkey from a human being sometimes.
Stay away from my woman.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And we all have been there when hormones are surging through your body. You don't always make the best decisions. Okay.
Right.
So that's part of it. And then nobody's quite sure why they seem to target male carriers, but there are plenty of examples and stories where male carriers have been targeted or run at by aggressive turkeys. And one of the thoughts is that male carriers, they have gray uniforms and then they have stripes of red and blue on them. And if you look at a turkey's head, the turkey's head is blue with red appendages on it. And so the thought is possibly that the male turkey is seeing that red and blue, and they're saying, hey, that looks just like the red and blue of another male turkey who's trying to come in and take over my territory, or breed with my harem.
Okay. So they have something going on in terms of intelligence.
Well, yes. So every animal is very intelligent if they're in their own setting. I mean, and turkeys obviously are intelligent animals in the sense that they're able to adapt to a quickly changing landscape. They're able to survive in this urban landscape and things like that. So they have a level of intelligence that works for them. Now,
that was the most beautiful. I'm sorry, I'm smiling so big right now because that was the most beautiful response to if turkeys are dumb.
Well, they're not curing cancer, okay?
Right.
But they are smart enough to survive in a relatively complicated landscape. I would assume for an animal.
Yeah, I mean, because they were basically on the brink of extinction just like 50 years ago, right?
Yeah, they weren't. Extinct means that that animal or that species is gone forever across the planet. So
okay, they're endangered.
Or the term that we would use is extirpation. So extirpation is that they're extinct from certain areas, but they're still present in other areas. But they might be blinking out in parts of their native territory or their historical range. And so, back in the early 1900s, mid 1900s, turkeys were starting to be on the decline. And again, a lot of that is due to habitat issues. So if you think about Wisconsin in the early 1900s, the entire area of Wisconsin was logged over. And right. So, we think about northern Wisconsin right now, northern third, especially as a forested area, which it is. And historically, that was the landscape, when the Native Americans were here before this land got colonized. But then in the 1900s, that entire state got logged. And so there weren't trees on the landscape. And trees, as we talked about, is an important component for turkeys for a number of reasons.
Their bread and butter.
Yeah. And so because of a habitat loss or modification, the turkey population started to decline. So, but then it's a really interesting history. Kind of these turkeys are kind of linked with us because then after it got logged over, and then people started farming those areas, even up in the northern parts of Wisconsin. And then in the Industrial Revolution came in, people abandoned the farmland, went to the cities because for jobs and a better way of living. And as the farmland became fallow, then trees started to regenerate on those farmlands. And then we started to have more available habitat for turkeys. And so then we kind of regrew the habitat, and then the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources started restocking turkeys. And so they would trade states, and then those states shipped turkeys up to Wisconsin, and then the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources released turkeys on the land and started to restock the population.
Oh my goodness.
So there you go. Little quick history lesson.
So you study urban coyotes and red fox. Love that. And you study the populations on campus. Are they a threat to the turkeys?
They certainly will eat turkey eggs. So turkeys nest on the ground, and they will eat the eggs out of the nest, but so will a whole host of other species like raccoons and skunks and other things like that. They will eat the poults. So that's what we call young turkeys, or poults. They will eat the poults. But once the turkey gets to be an adult size, that's a pretty formidable opponent for a coyote, and especially for a fox. That's a big animal. They can puff up themselves. They can expand their wings. Turkeys have spurs on the back of each of their legs, and so they can use those spurs for defense. They can.
I'm sorry, I'm ignorant right now. Can you even explain that one step further? The spurs.
So they have a growth on the back of their leg that it literally is a spur. So think about a thorn on a tree or on a bush. Okay. Essentially, that's what it is on the back of their leg.
A stabber.
A stabber. It's not as sharp as a rose thorn, but it's pointed enough that it can hurt you if you get hit by it. So they can use that, but then they run pretty quickly to get away from coyotes and red fox or other predators, and then they also will fly up into trees. And obviously, coyotes and red fox are not good climbers.
Well, what would you say? It sounds like a lot of creatures are after their eggs. Like, what's a Madison turkey's worst enemy? It's certainly not us people, even though some people are annoyed with them.
Yeah. Again, it depends on this life stage. So at the eggs, it can be a bunch of different things, as we talked about. Same for poults. But once you get to be an adult-sized turkey, there really is not much out there that will get you, other than getting hit by a car. That's so vehicle mortality is a primary form of mortality in the city. And there are, because as you've talked a little bit about already, there's an abundance of turkeys in places like the Arboretum and some of the Madison city parks. There have been efforts by a federal agency called the Wildlife Services, which is part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where they've gone in and they have lethally removed turkeys from certain areas simply because there's too many turkeys in those areas. And so not many people are aware of that because it's not a hidden secret necessarily, but the way that they conduct these management activities, they try to do it out of sight of humans, and certainly when humans aren't around, just for the safety of the birds and for the humans. But there are select and very targeted, limited lethal removal programs going on in the city at times.
Do you have any last thoughts to leave us with in terms of changing ways we understand turkeys?
I think that people generally like turkeys. I do get calls and emails, and people say something about, well, I've got too many turkeys in my backyard. I can't go feed the birds, or they're pecking at my glass windows in my house, or whatever the case is. But I think generally people like turkeys for the most part, and it's one of the birds that people recognize and can identify. It's not like golden winged warbler, for example, that nobody's going to know what that is unless you're really into birding.
Right. It's pretty distinctive.
It's pretty distinctive. It's pretty cool. And I think it's pretty cool that people get a chance to see them, because, until a couple decades ago, they weren't all that frequent in cities, and they weren't around people all that much. And so I think it enriches people's lives to see them and to have them around. And it's a pretty cool thing to see.
Well, Professor Drake, thank you so much. It's been enlightening and very fun.
Well, likewise, I enjoyed myself, and I really appreciate the invitation to come on your podcast.
That's David Drake, professor of forest and wildlife ecology at UW-Madison. And here's what else Madison's talking about: fighting hate. A hate group that calls themselves the Blood Tribe marched across downtown Madison and near the UW-Madison campus this past Saturday. According to multiple sources, including the Cap Times, they were wearing masks, waving swastikas, and shouting racial slurs. Local leaders and lawmakers, including UW-Madison Chancellor Jennifer Mnuchin, Madison Mayor Satya Rhodes Conway, Governor Tony Evers, and U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin, have condemned the neo-Nazi march. The Madison Police Department monitored the incident, but say the demonstration was lawful. And in other news, the beloved long-running tavern, the Silver Dollar, is set to close. Silver Dollar owners announced that they've sold the building, which is right off the Capitol Square. Owners told reporters that this closure comes with mixed feelings, and their family is still considering whether they might open later in a new location. Hey, we are all ears for that. Crossing our fingers. We'll miss you in the meantime, Silver Dollar. That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then,